Chapter 13. Nursing. Consort Liwa's condition was worse than Mau Mau had thought. She changed the millet porridge for thin gruel, but Liwa could hardly sip it from the spoon. Mau Mau had to work Liwa's mouth open, pour the gruel in, and gently help her swallow. Not the most decorous routine, but then this wasn't the moment to be worrying about decorum. This was the biggest problem. Liwa wasn't eating. An old proverb held that a healthy diet was as restorative as good medicine, and Mau Mau knew her patient wouldn't get better if she didn't have some food. And so she persisted obstinately in trying to feed Liwa. She had the air in the room changed, and the cloying scent of incense lessened, replaced by that characteristic odor of a sick person. They must have been burning the incense in hopes of covering the smell of Liwa's body. How long had it been since she'd had a bath? Mau Mau felt ever more enraged at the witless ladies-in-waiting. At least the young woman Mau Mau had upbraided seemed to have learned something from it. The whitening powder she'd been using on Liwa had been from her own secret stash. Sad to say, the eunuch who had failed to find and confiscate the powder was condemned to be beaten. Birth could affect even the punishments one received. Mau Mau derided the eunuch in charge of all this as a worthless idiot to his face, but it didn't seem to mean much. He turned out to be one of those high-born people with special proclivities. Mau Mau had a cloth and a bucket of hot water prepared, then summoned the other ladies-in-waiting to help her wash Consort Liwa. The ladies looked uncomfortable, but at a glare from Mau Mau, they meekly went along. Liwa's skin was so dry, the water hardly beaded on it, and her lips were painfully cracked. They applied honey rather than red makeup to her lips, and her hair was tied back in a simple knot. Now, they just had to get her to take some tea whenever they could. Once in a while, she was given watered-down soup instead. It would help her get some salt. This would cause her to use the toilet more, expelling the toxins from her body. Mau Mau had thought the consort might reject this unusual new caretaker, even think of her as an enemy, but Liwa was as pliant as a doll. Looking at her vacant eyes made one doubt whether she even knew one person from another. But then they were able to increase her portion of gruel from half a bowl to an entire bowl, and then to add some rice and grains. When Liwa was able to chew and swallow without help, meat stock was added, making a savory soup, along with mashed fruits. One day, when she had managed to use the toilet on her own, Liwa suddenly spoke. "Why, Mau Mau stood closer to catch the whispered words. "Why didn't you just let me die?" The voice was vanishingly small. Mau Mau frowned. "If that's what you want, then just stop eating. The fact that you keep taking your gruel tells me you don't want to die." And then she offered Liwa some warm tea. The woman gave a gentle cough. "I see." She smiled, however faintly. Liwa's ladies-in-waiting tended to have one of two reactions to Mau Mau. Either they were terrified of her, or they were terrified of her but still fought back. Guess I went a little too far. Once Mau Mau's emotions hit a boiling point, she was wont to boil over herself. She knew it was a bad habit. She had even abandoned the delicate language of the court for more uncouth expressions. Mau Mau might not show much emotion, but she had a warm heart, and it honestly hurt her to see people regard her from afar as if looking at a devil or a monster. She rationalized this latest outburst. It had been in the service of taking care of Lady Liwa. It had been necessary. Jinshi himself put in frequent appearances. Whether on the orders of the emperor, or at the behest of Consort Gyokyo, Mau Mau didn't know. Bent on making use of anything that was provided to her, though, she asked him to have a bath added to the Crystal Pavilion. The extant bathing facilities were expanded to include a steam bath. Mau Mau tried, indirectly of course, to communicate to Jinshi that he could not help and was not wanted here, but he still stopped by to smile at her at every opportunity with the tenacity of a ghost that was haunting her. He clearly, Mau Mau concluded, was a eunuch with far too much time on his hands. She wished he would take a cue from Gaoxuan, who at least had the decency to bring treats whenever he showed up. A person as thoughtful as that might make someone a good husband, even if he was a eunuch. Liwa, meanwhile, was encouraged to consume fiber, drink water, and to sweat, anything that would help move the poison out of her system. 2 months passed focused on this and only this, and finally Consort Liwa was even able to walk on her own. She had already been in severe condition on account of her emotional malaise. Mau Mau judged that as long as she didn't take in any more of the toxins, she would be all right. It would take some time yet for her to regain her healthy figure and the flush in her cheeks, but she no longer seemed to be standing on the banks of the river that divided this world from the next. The night before Mau Mau was to return to the Jade Pavilion, she went to pay her formal respects to Consort Liwa. She half expected to be dismissed as someone too lowly to merit the consort's notice, but this was not the case. Liwa, she learned, had her pride, but she wasn't prideful. With all that had happened surrounding the prince, Mau had come to think of Liwa as quite a disagreeable woman, but in fact she had the comportment and personality of a true imperial consort. "I'll take my leave tomorrow, milady," Mau told her. She added some instructions regarding what the lady was to eat, and a few other cautionary pieces of advice, and then went to leave the room. But Liwa said from behind her, "Young lady, do you suppose I will ever be able to bear another child?" Her voice was flat and effectless. "I don't know. The only way to find out is to try." "But how, when His Majesty no longer has any interest in me?" Her meaning was clear enough. She had only conceived the prince because the emperor happened to visit her after his time with his favorite, Consort Gyokyo. The fact that there was 3 months' difference in age between the little princess and the little prince revealed the truth of the matter. "It was His Majesty who ordered me to come here in the first place. Now that I'm leaving, I must think you will see him again." It wasn't a political or emotional problem. The issue was the same for both of them. The rear palace being what it was, love and romance had no place here. "Do you think I can yet win over Consort Gyokyo? I, who ignored her advice and killed my own child doing so?" "I don't think it's a question of winning. And as for our mistakes, we can learn from them." Mau took down a vase that was decorating the wall, a slim thing designed to hold a single flower. At the moment, it was occupied by a star-shaped bellflower. "There are hundreds, even thousands of kinds of flowers in the world. But who would dare say whether a peony or the iris is the more beautiful?" "I don't have her emerald eyes or fiery hair." "If you have something else instead, then there is no problem." Mau's gaze traveled down from Consort Liwa's face. They always said those were the first things to go when you lost weight, but Liwa still had her ample endowment. "I think size like that is quite a treasure." Mau had seen a great deal in the brothels, so she should know. She would keep to herself the fact that she'd been struck by a certain amount of amazement every time they bathed the consort. Given that Liwa was the rival of her own mistress, Mau couldn't help her out too much, but she decided to give the woman a last gift before she left. "May I whisper in milady's ear?" And then, quietly, so that no one else would hear her, she gave Consort Liwa some advice. A secret technique one of the older ladies of the night had told her it couldn't hurt to know. Sadly, Mau lacked equipment of the necessary size, but this particular technique seemed the perfect thing for Consort Liwa. Liwa's face went as red as an apple when she heard it. What Mau might have told her was a subject of lively debate among Liwa's ladies-in-waiting for some time afterwards, but it was all the same to Mau. There was a period after this when His Majesty's visits to the Jade Pavilion became noticeably less frequent. With a mixture of irony and real relief, Consort Gyokyo only said, "Phew, finally I can get a little sleep." Mau gawked in surprise, but that's a story for another time.